Oh, are you still having a bit of an issue getting to sleep? That's okay. Why don't you come cuddle in with me again? Oh no, I've just been reading. Well, no, you've had a busy day. It was important that you got an early night. Come on, come cuddle in. Ah, there we go. And you still feeling sleepy? All right. Can I get you anything? Is there anything you'd like, or? Oh, I wish I could wave a magic wand and put you back to sleep. It'll be okay. You'll go back to sleep soon. You can just lay here and relax. I've got you. That's it. All right. Now try and slow your breathing a little bit. I know sometimes it spikes when we're kind of shocked awake by something. We do that kind of like almost like you're falling and then when you're awake. But slow breaths. That's it. You're doing a great job. Just nice, slow breaths. That's it. Now, is there anything else I can help with? Right. Well, why don't I tell you a wee bedtime story? How does that sound? Just a little story to help take your mind off things and help you drift off to sleep. Okay. Well, a long time ago, there was a young man named Douglas who was tending to his flock of sheep high up on the hills. Douglas had his flock for a long time. He'd been taught how to tend to his sheep by his father, who now worked down at the big house. And he knew exactly what to do and when to do it. So when he was resting against a rock, reading a small book that he'd kept in his pockets for just such an occasion, and he turned around and he noticed that none of his sheep were there anymore. He slowly stood, putting the book back in his pocket, and he stepped up onto the rock and then craned up onto his tippy toes. But as he looked around, nothing could be seen. All that was there was the green grass and the rolling hills for as far as the eye could see. He started climbing the hill a little bit more, hoping to get to a higher vantage point. From there, he hoped that he could look out and see his sheep. As he came to a craggy outcrop, he heard the soft baa of sheep nearby. And there, around the corner, was one of his sheep. It was very strange, though. Why would his sheep have come up here? They didn't often move around on their own like this. But as he got closer, he saw in the rocks a small opening, a little crevice between two large boulders. But as he stared into it, something caught his eye. Something glinting, something just beyond his reach. So, giving his sheep a gentle pat, he squeezed into the crevice, reaching out his hand, trying to get that small thing that twinkled back at him. And when he'd finally grasped it, he stopped to look around and realized that he wasn't in between two rocks anymore. He was standing on sand. The waves lapped gently at the shoreline. Looking back, he could see a huge cliff stretching up as far as his eyes could see. But looking down again, he noticed a series of imprints and realized his sheep had come this way. Now, he didn't know where he was or indeed how he'd got there. So, quickly looking around, he grabbed some seaweed and laid out a sign so if he was to wander back, he'd know which crack in the cliff led him home. Following the tracks for what seemed like hours, he finally came to a small village. He could hear voices and he could hear other sounds, but more importantly, he could hear his sheep bang away. He walked into the village, and at first everything seemed normal. Nothing seemed out of place, just people going about their business. But the more he looked around, the stranger the people looked, and the more they looked at him. Douglas quickly realized this is very much not a place he should be. But he was looking for his sheep, and he was not going home without them. That's it. Just rest your head. So, Douglas followed the sound of the sheep until he saw a large pen, and in that pen were his sheep, as well as a few other four-legged creatures that he did not recognize, and admittedly ones he did not wish to recognize. As he approached the fence, he placed his hands atop it, and no sooner had he done so than a voice called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" He spun around, and standing only a few feet away was this willowy, reedy-looking creature, tall but so stick-thin. Its arms were a great length, its neck so tall, and its head far too big for what seemed like it should be able to support. "Well, these are my sheep, you see." The creature looked at him again and stalked forward until it was standing right in front of him, and he, at that moment, could fully appreciate just how much bigger this thing was than he. "Don't look like your sheep." "Well, how can you tell?" The creature opened its mouth to reply, and then paused for a moment. And as quick as a flash, it reached into its little linen jacket pocket and pulled out a small reed pipe. "That's a good point, stranger. What makes you think these sheep are yours?" "Well, you see," Douglas began, looking around to see if anyone else was paying attention to them, "I was minding my business, watching my flock, reading a small book up on the hills. And I turned around and all my sheep were gone. And I went looking for them, found one of them by this small crack in the rocks. Now I slipped into the crack, chasing something, and then I realized I was on a beach. I don't know how I got there, but I followed the hoof prints in the sand all the way through the village and through the mud to here. And then when I heard the sheep, I came up to them." So you're telling me you're not really from round here?" "No," said Douglas. Wasn't exactly a surprise. He thought he'd been quite clear about that, especially now that he'd seen a few other folk appear and realised that he looked nothing like them and they looked nothing like him. "I am certainly not from round here, but I can say without doubt that at least some of those sheep are also not from round here." Well, still, the sheep are here now. They're in my pen. They're my sheep. Is that how that works? What do you mean? Well, look around. If I was to walk up to that lady over there and take her handkerchief and put it in my pocket, would that handkerchief then be mine? Well, no. You've stolen it from her. Precisely, said Douglas. If I walked around taking things that weren't mine and simply because they were in my possession, claiming them as mine, that doesn't make them mine. Just as, walking around, you may have come across my sheep, and I thank you for looking after them, but just because they're in your pen, it doesn't mean they're your sheep. The figure looked around. He seemed almost puzzled by this concept. Douglas couldn't quite figure out why. It was fairly straightforward by all accounts, but yet this creature seemed utterly stumped. Example, said Douglas. If I was in that pen, would I also be yours? Well, the creature seemed to and ah, and Douglas for a moment was a bit worried that he was going to say yes, for Douglas didn't fancy his chances of being able to run away from this thing. I suppose not. Right then. So did you find these sheep, or did someone bring them to you? No, I found the sheep. Okay, and did you find them down by the beach? Aye, I did. Okay. Well, if you found the sheep down by the beach, and you brought the sheep from there up to here, and then someone else has appeared from the same direction and has told you a story that matches up with how you came across the sheep in the first place, surely that lends some air of trustworthiness to the person talking. Well, I'm not so sure about that. How do I know the sheep really belong to you? Well, I could tell you their names, and I know some of them might answer to them. All right then. You go call some of those sheep and you see if they turn up, okay? The creature gave him a wide grin, and for a moment Douglas thought, oh, this may not go how I'd hoped. But tentatively he turned around, placed his hands on the fence, placed his feet on the lower rung, lifted himself up and called out, Morag! Morag! He tried it a few more times and a few more times after that, and for a moment his heart started to sink, but after a few more times, a sheep raised its head, trotted over, and butted up against the fence. He patted it fondly around the ear and scratched behind its head and under its chin. Morag seemed to like the pets under the chin. He turned around and looked at the creature behind him. Now, given the fact that I know this sheep's name, do you think this sheep might belong to me? Well, how do I know that's that sheep's name? Maybe it was chance. Douglas sighed. He was not having any luck here. It really did seem like this creature wanted to keep his sheep, but he was not leaving without them. Wait a moment there, stranger, the creature said to him. I know someone who can speak to them. I'll go find him. Douglas didn't even have a moment to process that before the creature ranged off. Steps so long he could never have kept up even if he was running. And he stood there, gave Morag some more pets, called out to a few other sheep who, just as Morag had, trotted up and got his affection. As he waited there, staring around at the strange houses, little shacks really, but cosy looking, built with love, if not to best effect. But as he wandered around the paddock, looking at the other creatures there, he couldn't help but marvel at what was in each one. Creatures with horns, creatures with wings, creatures with eyes as big as dinner plates. But a voice called out to him, and he wandered back to his sheep. This is my friend, said the first stranger. He'll talk to the sheep. It took all he had for Douglas not to scoff, but he agreed. The chap started making some strange noises, and to his utter astonishment, Morag returned them. Douglas stood there, couldn't believe what was going on. But after a few exchanges between new creature and apparently a talking sheep, the guy stood, nodded his head, looked at the first person, and walked off. He turned back around and looked at Douglas. Well, it seems the sheep do belong to you. Morag here said that you were the one that looked after them. Exactly, I am, said Douglas. And I lost my sheep, so I came looking for them. I thought that you were really going to try and keep them. No. I like sheep. I like looking after sheep. As you can see, I look after lots of other animals. But these ones aren't mine. However, they did say that you take very good care of them. So I'm happy to give you back your sheep. Why don't I take you back to where you can get back to your own land, though? It's not quite so safe for your kind here after dark. It was only at that moment that Douglas realised the sun had indeed started to set. Oh, right, okay, yeah. He undid the gate, and they guided the sheep out, Douglas at the front, and the long-legged gentleman far behind, making sure nobody was left. They got back to where he'd piled the seaweed, and he saw the crack in the cliff. Well, this is it for me, he turned back. Thank you for tending to my sheep while I was away. Well, thank you for taking care of them. It's my pleasure, said Douglas. Will I be able to get back here? "Maybe," said the creature, "but I'd be a lot more careful with the sheep, and yourself, if ever you do." Douglas smiled and gave him a friendly wave and gently ushered his sheep into the crack in the cliff. And with one more smile back to the friendly stranger, he walked through himself. As he got through, he noticed the sun was setting here as well. He thought, "Oh, better get the sheep back home." And as he guided them down the hill, he thought, "No one's going to believe me. I don't believe me." But he knew where he'd been and the things he'd seen. "Okay. You sleep now. I'll be here when you wake up. Good night."